Okay. I'm thinking a lot about progeny in the current course of events. So Parshas BaMidbar talks all about the census of the Jewish people and how many begats we can find, how many children everybody had, and what the population of all the different tribes was. And what you find is sometimes when you read Parshas BaMidbar, Parshas Pinchas, read those Parshiot, and you find, the Torah gives you the census numbers, and it's how dry can you get? I mean, how boring can the Torah be? And what possible relevant information is there? What kind of spiritual message am I supposed to take out of census numbers? So let me just offer this one very important concept that we can get out of the census that is taken at the very beginning of the Jewish people's sojourn in the desert, which is where we are at the beginning of Sefer BaMidbar, which we're going to read this Shabbos. One of the very interesting things that you see is that we know that the Leviim are counted separately from the rest of the Jewish people. There is a census that God commands. There are multiple censuses that are taken, is it censuses or censi? I'm not sure. But that are taken during the Jewish people's sojourn in the desert. Once here now at the beginning, and later on towards the end of the 40 years. But one thing that you do see very interesting is that the numbers are relatively consistent except for the tribe of Levi. If you take a look, it says that when God in chapter 3, when we talk about the census of the tribe of Levi, we don't count the males from the age of 20 and above as we do with the other 12 tribes. The tribe of Levi is mi ben chodesh v'mala. You count them from the age of 30 days and above, so you would expect that there would be a larger number because you're including all the kids that are from 0 to 20 in the census, all the males from 0 to 20 in the census. But in reality, you end up, from all of the Levite males, you get 22,000 males. Okay? Now let's take a look at the census of the other tribes of Israel. And I'm just giving you paragraph 2 just gives you the first paragraph. It says, for the tribe of Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda was the largest. They had 74,600. 74,600 of what? That's from the age of 20 and above, capable of being enlisted into the army. Okay, then you have the tribe of Yisachar. What's their number? 54,400. Then Matei Zevulun, 57,400. And if you go through all of the list, and I just saved you some time, you look at the numbers of each and every tribe. Yehuda 74,000, Yisachar 54,000, Zevulun 57,000, Reuven 46,500, Shimon 59,000, Gad 45, Ephraim 40, Menashe 32. He's the closest to Levi. Okay, so you could argue, okay, Ephraim and Menashe, okay, because they split the tribe in half, so they missed, they're one generation short, so maybe they're not. So you can account certainly for that being a smaller number than everybody else. But even the smallest, which is Menashe, is over 10,000 more than the entire tribe of Levi. It doesn't seem to make any sense. Levi, after all, is the holiest tribe, and yet they have the smallest number. Binyamin 35,000, Dan 62,000, Asher 41,000, Naphtali 53,000. So what's going on? Why is the tribe of Levi so small by comparison? So take a look at the Ramban. We're going to look at two different commentaries today. We're going to look at the commentary of the Ramban and the commentary of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Says the Ramban, V'hinei lo hayu shevet haleviim ki sha'ar hashevatim. He says the tribe of Levi was unlike all of the other tribes. Ki mi ben chodesh v'mala lo hayu rak 22 elef. He says among those who were 30 days and above, there were only 22,000. Umi ben shloshim shana kulam shemanat alafim. And he says, and from those who were 30 years, there were only 8,000. V'hinei Lo yagia mi ben 20 shana v'mala lachatzi shevet mi Yisrael hapachot shebekulam. He says, when you think about it, it would turn out that those who were 20 years and older would not even be a half of any of the other tribes. He says, you can't say that it's because they had occupational danger. You know, sometimes when you're a family that's involved, let's say if you're a trapeze artist, your family of trapeze artists, so okay, we can account for deaths in the family because what you do is dangerous for a living. And the Torah actually says that to be a Levi is dangerous, because if you carry the Aron in an inappropriate way, God will strike you down. But that job hadn't even started yet. They weren't even really traveling yet with the Aron. That was not their job. They were just getting started on that. He says, V'zeh tamiyah. He says, I don't understand. It's just astounding, he says. How could it be that the ones that are the most beloved and the most blessed of Hashem, the family of Levi, the tribe of Moshe, tribe of Aaron, that they should be the ones with the smallest population? Why weren't they blessed by God to have more children? Va'ani choshev, what I think, says the Ramban, is shezeh chizuk l'masha amru raboteinu, that this supports what our sages tell us. Ki shivto shel Levi lo haya b'shibud meleches Mitzrayim v'avodas parech. That the tribe of Levi was the only tribe that was not enslaved. The tribe of Levi was not enslaved. Now we know this because this was actually instituted by Yoseph. Yoseph, who had the foresight to anticipate that the Jewish people would eventually be enslaved, knew that he needed to create some kind of tribe, some kind of clan among the Israelites that would have some respite from slavery, that they could keep the tradition alive. So he made a policy that if you were from the priestly class of Egyptian society, your property could not be seized and you could not be sold as government property. Remember that story at the end of Parshas Vayechi, where Yosef appropriates everyone's land and says, okay, you all belong to the government now? He completely socializes all of Egypt, except for, it says, just the Kohanim of Egypt, the priests of Egypt, were exempt. They were allowed to keep their own property and remained free men. And that was a policy that lasted for generations in Egypt to the time when the Jewish people were enslaved. So he says as follows, V'hinei Yisrael asher mararu hamitzrim es chayeim ba'avodah kasha kidei lama'atam. We know that the Jewish people, their lives were embittered and enslaved. Why? What was the objective? What did Paro have in mind in enslaving them? He wanted to diminish the Jewish people. He wanted to shrink them through all of the oppression, through all of the persecution. He figured the population will shrink. And God did exactly the opposite. And he says, I'm going to show Egypt. You're going to try and make the Jewish people small. I'll only increase them in size. As the Torah says, that the more that the Egyptians afflicted the Jews, the more populous they became. It was bidavka to show Paro that all of his efforts to suppress the Jewish people and to diminish them were just going to have the exact opposite effect. And it also says that when Paro had ordered all of the Jewish baby boys to be thrown into the Nile, it says shortly afterwards that the nation grew extremely populous. Because God is basically saying, let's see whose efforts will come to fruition. My efforts or the Egyptians' efforts? God says, you want to diminish them? I'm going to show you. My efforts will bear fruit and not yours. Ava shevet Levi hayu parim v'ravim kederach kol haaretz v'lo alu lema'ala kisha'ar hashavatim. By contrast, because Shevet Levi were not enslaved and not oppressed in the same way that the Jewish people, they were not privy to that divine, miraculous blessing of going dafka lehefech. So it turns out that the more you were enslaved, the more populous you became. If you weren't enslaved, you just reproduced at the normal rate. And so Shevet Levi was the norm. It was all the other tribes that were the Yotzei Min HaKlal, and that they represented a miraculous overpopulation growth, an abnormal population rate. Okay, so that's the Ramban's explanation. This was a miracle. The miracle was that God blesses the oppressed and allows them to go. When Hashem wants you to be blessed, Hashem wants you to grow, no matter, to go lehefech of the objective of the oppressor, Hashem will miraculously make you become stronger and bigger. And there's definitely something a lot to say about that. But the Or HaChaim HaKadosh takes almost an opposite approach. And he suggests that there were no miracles involved here. Take a look at his beautiful insight. It's a part of a much larger section of the Or HaChaim's commentary, but this is the part that I've extracted for you. He says, V'hanachon be'inayhu. He says, what seems correct to me is ki shevet Levi ma'aseh echad lahem ki ma'aseh Amram. All of the tribe of Levi were imitative of that which Amram had done. Now, what do we know about Amram? We know that Amram was the leader of the Jewish people and certainly the leader of his tribe. He was Moshe Rabbeinu's father. He was the leader of the Jewish people at the time. Does anyone remember what he did? What did Amram do? He separated from his wife. He decided not to have any more children. Bishvil gezeras haben hayilod, as our sages tell us, that once he heard the decree that the newborn sons would be thrown into the Nile, he says, Lashav anu amelim, he says, we're working for naught, what's the whole point? And he decided procreation is a vain effort, and we're not going to do it anymore. V'hatam letzad shahayu me'unagim. He says, you know why? He says, I agree with the Ramban that the Levi tribe were not enslaved. But the fact that they were not enslaved is the very reason why they had this attitude towards procreation. Because they were used to an easier life. V'lo nishtabdu, and they had never been enslaved. And as a result, lo namas levavam kol kach, lir'os nit'ehem mushlachim bayor. They didn't have the stomach, or they didn't have a strong enough heart, they didn't have the courage to be able to procreate at the risk of seeing their children thrown into the Nile. K'maaseh ish Yisrael, asher mitzad hashibud v'ol ha'avodah, huzal v'hukal be'ineihem u'v'libam, lir'os yaldehem mushlachim bayor. He says, contrast that to the average Jew who was a slave. When you're a slave and you've seen death at your door so many times in your life, when you've seen the precipice of disaster courting you so many times in your life, then you don't recoil at the prospect of a child dying. That's not going to stop me from living my life. I know that disaster may strike at some time in my future, but I'm used to disaster. I'm used to tragedy. That's the story of my life. And therefore, I'm not going to stop living my life because of a fear that something terrible will happen, because that's what I've experienced my entire life. So the tribe of Levi, they were the mefunakim, the me'unagim. They were the ones who were, they were just fastidious people. In the 21st century, how many people die at home? Have your children ever seen dead people in their lives? How many of you have ever actually been with a person dying, right? It usually only happens, if you're fortunate enough, when an elderly parent or grandparent passes away, either at home or with palliative care. How many times do children see those kinds of things? But if you're a slave in Egypt, and that's your whole life, death is all around you. The stench of death permeates your entire society. So then you're not scared of what may happen somewhere down the road. Let me just finish this, and then we'll come back to you in just a second. He therefore says, Gam shahayu mizalzalim ba'atzmam le'leid v'lazov b'sadosav v'mechilos ha'aretz asher ein adam nichbad shenafsho mechuberes lo k'shev levios sekain. He says, that's why our sages tell us Then what did the Jewish women do to hide their children from the Egyptians? They went out into the fields and had their babies there, and they just left their children there. And the Medrash tells us, the Agadah relates how HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent angels to protect the children from the elements and feed them and take care of them. Right? How does a woman give birth out in the field and forsake her child? You do it because you're tough. You do it because that's what life is all about. And that's why this is indicated by the fact that Amram divorced his wife. He says, I can't stay, I can't procreate, I can't continue this farce of creating children if they're going to possibly die. He says, so basically he says that that's the reason why Shevet Levi had so few children, because they desisted to procreate when the rest of the Jewish people insisted on procreating. And it has to do with your economic level. It has to do with your tolerance for pain, your threshold for pain and suffering in your life. And there's such a powerful message, we don't have to take it into the stark contrast of what it was like to live, let's say in the Dark Ages, what it's like to live today. Just take a microcosm of that contrast and think about to yourself, I've gone to certain houses of very, very wealthy people, and they'll tell you, I'd like to introduce you, let me give you a tour of my house. And here's our bedroom, and here's our daughter Tiffany's bedroom. You walk into Tiffany's bedroom, and Tiffany's bedroom is about the size of my house, and she's got a whole zoo full of stuffed animals, and she's got her pictures and posters and computer and all of these other things. And you say to yourself, well, it makes sense why they only have one child, because there can only be one Tiffany, right? There can't be more to that family, right? Because they have to give so much to this child. Whereas then you go to a lower economic class. Let's say you go to a family of immigrants, and they're living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 10 kids, and the mother's pregnant with her 12th child without any care in the world, because we're going to, what difference does it make? So we'll add another few grains of rice into the pot. There'll be enough for everybody. So you see the difference that one's economic perspective provides. You see what being accustomed to a certain type of comfort in life leads to, as far as the level of procreation, the level of having children. Obviously, tuition is a big concern also. We won't discuss that right now. That in itself is its own incentive for birth control, which is a tragedy unto itself. It's actually causing birth rates to decline in the Orthodox community. But that's another tragedy that's happening as we speak. But the point is that you see what a person's exposure to adversity can do as far as the life choices that they make, especially when it comes to the number of children that they choose to have. Now, something that's fascinating is that if we look at the end of the Torah, end of BaMidbar in Parshas Pinchas, and we take a look at the census that the Torah makes at that point, we find something fascinating. We find that Shevet Levi increases, and we also find that over the span of a short period of time, if we go to Sefer Divrei Hayamim Aleph Perek Chav Gimel, says that by the time that they had made an adjustment and they had come into Eretz Yisrael, Shevet Levi numbered 38,000 only from those who were from the ages of 30 to 50. So a few generations later after this, Shevet Levi's population adjusts itself and becomes now commensurate to the rest of the Jewish people. And why is that? It's because once the Jewish people receive the Torah, then their economic status plays a much smaller role in the life decisions that they make. Their exposure to adversity is not the primary criterion for the decision making as far as how they're going to create a family, but rather it's the value systems of the Torah. The Torah now gives us a mitzvah of pru'urvu that is unconditional, that does not depend upon whether life's going to be great for every single child or whether life's going to be a little bit tight or tough for every single child. Right? Now the criterion is pru'urvu because we need to grow the Jewish people. And that's the new value system that Levi embraces, Shevet Levi embraces, just like everyone else in Klal Yisrael. So once your focus is on spirituality and developing all of the holy neshamas of Klal Yisrael, and you have a spiritual outlook, then your economic status or your physical conditions around you are of much less importance, and you're able to have that kind of outlook of just procreating for the sake of increasing Hashem's people. And that, I think, is a very important message as we enter into the Chag of Shavuot, is that we have to consider to ourselves how our lives have been enhanced and how our value systems have changed of the entire Jewish people based upon the beautiful Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given to us. And one of those great value shifts that the Torah has provided for Klal Yisrael and by extension to the rest of the world is that it's not all about creating a comfortable life, it's about creating a meaningful life. I've never heard of anyone telling me, I wish I didn't have so many kids. I've heard a lot of people say, I wish I had more kids. I've never heard anyone regretting having too many children. And a lot of that has to do with the value judgments that we make that are based upon just the outlooks that we have in life. So we should, in one of the ways that we celebrate the giving of the Torah for this Shavuos, the celebration should be is that Baruch Hashem, that Hashem gave us a Torah which has provided us with these beautiful values to realize that life is about meaning, not about who gets the most stuff at the end. Questions, we'll take some questions or comments. I know that someone had their hand up, yes?
Oh, I did, yeah. I was just going to say that you could relate survivors from the Holocaust to those slaves that had seen everything and were afraid.
Yeah, very much so.
There's a lot of survivors that are very courageous. They're not afraid of things.
Not afraid of anything. And that was the key, by the way, to that generation's success, is that people came to this country with not 2 nickels to rub together. And they were fearless. They basically said, I've seen it all. There's nothing, what more could have possibly happened to me that I haven't already experienced? And so they took risks, and they did what needed to be done. And that's why many of them became so financially successful, because, and then compare that to my generation, to our children's generation that come after us, and we're very conservative, we're very careful, we're very cautious, we don't want to go out on a limb because who knows, and the reality is, we have so many more safety nets than our parents did. You know, our parents didn't have a safety net. They were swinging on that trapeze without a net, but they were fearless. And we have the net. Most of us have a safety net, and we still are fearful of taking those risks. It all has to do with the adversity that we may or may not have faced in life. Yeah.
The question I had is, you were saying that the tribe of Levi had these population. This is before days, right? And how did they know about birth control or how to prevent having children?
Well, that's the story in the Gemara. It's not that they practiced birth control, they just separated from their wives. That's the most effective method of birth control that I know of, is abstinence.
So they knew about that? They knew about that? Because, like,
they knew that if you don't live with your wife, you won't have children, yes.
They misbehaved. There was there was all kinds of corruption. Wasn't there
No, there was before the Torah there was corruption among all the other nations, but the Jewish people were chaste. That's what we learned a couple of weeks ago when we learned about Shlomit Bat Divri. She was the only one that had this tragic fall from grace because she was the only unchaste woman, and even her, she did it only by accident. Right? All the
How did they
Torah.
know how long to separate? Like, how did they know anything?
They said goodbye.
Like, they actually, there was like no contact at all with it.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Find that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Have a good Yom Tov.
I don't